All right, thanks for doing this, Jim. I won't go into the business credentials off you because anyone can Google that and find it online. And I think it's honestly a waste of time from knowing you for so many years. I think knowing more about your philosophy for life and mental health stuff, I think is probably more important and valuable for people to hear. So let's get straight into it. And thank you for doing this with your time as well. So maybe you want to touch on at the start, why is mental health or mental illness important to you?
It's a huge issue for us because we have contact with so many people. There are nearly 5,000 gyms franchisees out there, and far more than that if you count employees and so forth. And it's an issue that comes up all the time. People are failing, people getting complaints, people who are not making the income they should. Mental health comes up again and again and again, so it's a major focus for us.
Now, you've had the business, or Jim's Group, for 30 years in essence.
Yeah.
Did you notice it back then at all? Is it just something more recently that's been sort of coming up more often?
We're more aware of it more recently. I don't know whether that's because there's more mental health problems or because people are more free to talk about it than they used to be. It's actually brought up a lot. Like sometimes if a franchisee gets too many complaints and they think I should knock them off, and they say, well, it's affecting my mental health, and if you really cared about my welfare, you would. So that's in a sense using the mental health thing. Mind you, what I say to them is, yes, look, I understand getting complaints does provoke anxiety. On the other hand, if we let customer service go and you don't have enough work and you can't feed your family, that's also going to create anxiety. So it's not as simple as that.
So what does stuff that Jim's Group do for franchisees in regards to this sort of issue?
The biggest thing that we've found is having a sense of connection, of community. For example, when we first started off in gyms, we just used to give people leads, and if they had a problem, they'd ring us up. And we quickly found out that that wasn't enough, that what we needed to do was run meetings. So the franchisees who were near to my office used to come in regularly, and we have meetings in my lounge room initially, and they were pretty happy. The further we got away, the less happy they were. And we realized that actually meeting regularly with other franchisees is very important in creating a sense of community. In fact, so important that when franchisees don't have meetings, they tend to fail. Our first interstate franchisees mostly failed, and we think one of the main reasons is there was no meetings. We've actually worked out how many meetings to have. There's a figure, and it's 8 meetings a year, because we found out that about once every 6 weeks is optimum. More than that doesn't help. Less than that, the less meetings they have, the less happy they are. So it's an opportunity, obviously, to learn about the business, and it's also an opportunity to connect with other people. Because what will happen is somebody will be in business and will be going through a really hard time because they've got a really difficult client, or their machine's broken down, or something's gone wrong, or they've done a quote which has ended up working for nothing. There's all kinds of things that go wrong in business. We find that if there's other franchisees they talk to and they say, oh yeah, that happened to me, so and this is how I dealt with it, and it's fine, you just get through it, and you'll make $5,000 next week and you'll be okay. That relationship building. And then when they come to meetings, they actually tend to build bonds, and so they'll ring each other in the evenings. That's actually far more important than we thought. And the same thing with contact. In the beginning, we just used to say, if you've got a problem, ring us, which is great. That's nice to have an advice. But we found that there were some franchisors who were doing so much better than others, and we actually looked at what are they doing that's different. Now, we used to talk about doing business reviews, like half a day a year. No effect at all. It didn't make franchisees happier, didn't make them more likely to stay with us. But then we discovered that some franchisors were doing really well, had really happy franchisees. They weren't even doing these business reviews. What they were doing is they were ringing the franchisee regularly. We call that a proactive call. And we found that there was a remarkable correlation between how often the franchisor rings the franchisee and how happy they are, and how much they enjoy the business, and how likely they are to stay with us long term. So
in effect, you've been providing like a mentorship, proactive mentorship for a long, long time, even before, let's say, this mental health was right out in the issue. You're almost ahead of it, even though we didn't call it that. But the proactive contact is a form of that sort of mentorship, that regular check-in and guide. It's not just about business, but about life as well.
Look, it's good human decency. It's also very good business to look after the people that you're with.
And I know also there's a support hotline for franchisees as well to call, which I guess gets used a bit. And you've also done some events like Beyond Blue and stuff. You've done some mowing for charity and stuff like this.
We've been involved with Beyond Blue for many years because it's the single cause that's dearest to our heart. See, Jim's is very personal. Every one of our franchisees has my direct phone number and email address, so I tend to know about things. I also ring franchisees quite often. Like every Sunday night, I'll ring franchisees getting key anniversaries. I'll ring them. I have a chat to them, so I know what's going on, and you feel this. One of the biggest impetus that ever happened to change all this, though, was what happened in Western Australia a few years back. Well, one of our franchisees in the mowing division basically went crazy. He killed his 3 little girls and his wife and then his mother-in-law. And it was really, really, really shocking, really disturbing. Now, it wasn't actually his business. He actually said that his business was fine. It was a positive thing. He had some inner demons. But it was very, very upsetting to everybody involved. I went across to Perth to speak to the franchisees there, and we've got quite a few franchisees in the state. Just about most of them, the great majority of them, were actually there at a meeting which we had in a golf club. And I said to these guys that everybody was very emotional. And bear in mind, most of us didn't know this guy personally, but he was one of us. So it was a very emotional meeting, and I said to them, people, what can we do to try and reduce the chance of this horrifying thing ever happening again? And they came up with quite a few really, really good ideas. One of them was that it was important to have access to phone numbers for help. So what we did, as soon as I went back, we organised it. We actually got fridge magnet, a big fridge magnet done with all the emergency phone numbers, all different kinds of phone numbers that they can call it, stick it on the fridge. So that was one thing. Another thing they suggested, which was is that franchisors should have mental health training to be able to perhaps see this. So we've actually instituted a plan where all new franchisors now do a mental health training course, which I've done myself, and it's really good. Not that we're going to be psychologists or anything, but to understand the symptoms and understand what you can do and who you can refer people to. That was another thing that came out of it. And the other thing too, somebody actually put up their hand and they said, what if there was a franchisee who was available to help as advice on the phone, not the franchisor, not a psychologist, but a franchisee who just understood what they're going through and who could speak confidentially. And I said, well, look, that's a lot to ask for somebody to take on that kind of role. And because it would be just time, which you wouldn't get paid for, and it would be, a difficult thing to do. And I said, but who would volunteer for things like that? And then something happened that really moved me. Most of the people in that room put up their hands because they were just so concerned about each other. And that was a very moving experience. And we've set that up now. We've got in every state and in New Zealand, we've got volunteers who are names listed through the franchisee website online that you can call somebody.
Yeah, we have the mentor list, because I'm always updating people coming and off,
And more recently, we've actually employed a professional psychologist who's actually available without charge to any franchisee who wants to call. So we put all these things into place. But I have to say that the mental health direct stuff is good, but the biggest thing is a sense of community. And one of the things we're doing right now, actually, is we're getting a lot tougher on meetings. We're asking franchisors to actually make sure they've got to document the meetings and want to know who goes. And then we want to start talking to people who are not going and why. We found, for example, that if we put food on, even just pizza, barbecue, it doesn't have to be strong, it improves the meeting, has a better sense to it, and it's more attractive. People love free food, so...
absolutely. There's always pizzas and, pizzas or come to the golf club here or whatever it is and away they go. But
we've also started doing things like doing induction training, a 3-day course. We've got a section which Rachel Killen gives, which is about resilience.
Which was based on the book that you've listened to, the audio book, which was the Resilience Project by Hugh Van Cuylenberg, and that was as a result of you listening to that.
Gratitude, empathy, mindfulness.
Gem.
Actually, my son has learned that at his school. They teach that in
That's good.
It's called the mentoring class too.
Absolutely.
So he understands those principles. Yeah, it's very powerful stuff.
Because I remember when the incident happened, because I was in the offices as well, it did shake everyone because we heard about it on the TV, then someone said, it could be a Jim's mowing person. I remember you had the news network out there and you were very physically, emotionally, you could tell. And for anyone who doesn't know, you hate flying. Like you would, but you jumped on a plane straight away and you organised that meeting straight away to do it, which is, I thought, quite commendable, because as the leader of the business, it's one thing saying, all these things, but you were actually there and you held the meeting and you...
It's the most deeply shocking thing that's ever happened. We had a franchisee commit suicide just a few months back, and that was incredibly sad. It's not something you ever get used to. It's the worst thing. I don't think of anything else that goes on in business that's so upsetting. We had a young man from the
IT, yeah,
from IT last year, basically as a result of the lockdown, and we had the girls in tears in the office and stuff. He was just new. He'd only been with us 6 months.
He's a good operator, Anthony.
Good operator, yeah. Great future, and we're just looking at it and saying, what could we have done? And it was so difficult because we didn't see him.
No.
And if it hadn't been for the lockdown, he'd still be alive. He had problems, but it was just being alone at home, and he was working, and he was valued, and he was doing well, and from what I heard, he wasn't even sure he was going to actually be made permanent after 6 months, and he was, but we never told him that. I spoke to his mother, lovely lady, really. She didn't blame us at all. She was just really, really decent lady, and you just feel for the pain that she went through and the loss of this. He's a really great young man.
It really hits home. It really hurt because I know Anthony well. He was a good operator. He was always real helpful to everyone, and it was a shock when you just walk in one day and you hear that news. Like, what can you do? It's just one of those things which is just so prevalent. But I was going to say, you mentioned the pandemic then, and the pandemic obviously was very tough for everyone, and you're at the front of the whole thing, really pushing for small business, regardless of what everyone thinks about your politics. It's not a political thing for me. But you would have heard a lot of stories directly to you during that time. So what was the stuff that you were hearing?
Well, for example, I know directly, personally, of 2 franchisees who lost their marriages. Now, obviously there were strains already, but they lost their marriages and their homes as a direct result of the pandemic. That was something. I know of 2 franchisees, different franchisees, who had suicide attempts within their home. Now, they say the statistics show there's been no increase in suicide. I don't believe it. I saw the effects of that in terms of mental health were absolutely horrifying. They were dreadful. I don't think the government really, especially the state government here in Victoria, really understood what damage these things do. It's not just a matter of money. The government was paying money, but they weren't. The effect of being cut off, being isolated, being unable to work, especially when what really got me furious was the fact that the jobs we do, like the lawn mowing and the fencing and the outside stuff, is no possible danger to public health. That really, really got me upset. I'm still angry about it, actually, because I saw the hurt that caused.
And it wasn't just like, as you said, the lack of community. There's purpose. If their job's their purpose, their physical fitness as well, because a lot of them are physical workers. They lose all that fitness. It's very hard for them to get out of bed and stuff like that. But I was going to say that. What do you think then? There's all this money being thrown at mental health, especially in Victoria. It's nearly $1 billion or whatever is going to be done as a mental health levy to workplaces. What are they going to do? Me personally, I've got no confidence that the money will be spent properly. But the rate of suicide hasn't gone down or been even affected in the last 5 to 6 years. So why do you think that is, or what's going on with that? Because we've got all this awareness up the wazoo, and people are getting money to raise awareness, but it's not affecting the rate whatsoever.
Look, I think spending money on psychologists and stuff has value, but I really think the root causes have more to do with community. And I love one movement I really love is the men's shed movement, which is fantastic, because men are less likely to ask for help. But they're less likely to go and see a psychologist or ask for help, but they're more likely to commit suicide. And that's because we're taught to be, tough and, we can take it and you don't let anybody know what's going on. But I think anything that builds a sense of community is good. So I'd say the biggest single thing anybody can do is get involved in those kinds of activities. And it doesn't matter what the community is, in a sense. Now, I'm a practicing Christian, as you know, so to me church is a really, really important community, and my life group within the church and those kinds of connections. But other people, it might be a sporting club. It might be something like the men's sheds. It could be a community. It could be the CFO. My brother actually worked for the CFO, volunteered at the CFO for many years. CFA,
yeah.
Yeah, and that was really good for him. So there's many different groups. I think the best thing anybody can do, and I don't know if it requires government money, but just to get people involved with each other, close friends, or just relationships matter so much.
Now, I think the funding towards those organisations where they can grow bigger is probably more what they need, because the funding goes to all the big brands like Beyond Blue and stuff, and as I said, there's enough awareness and they've got enough marketing material on their website, whereas it's those organisations like the community ones. Men's Shed's important because there's more of your older gentlemen who will go to that, who can't do any sport maybe anymore, but they will build something for the community. Like my uncle runs one back home in Killarney. He runs a men's shed out the church there, Bridget Crosley. He made my mum, who passed away, like they made her stuff for a room and all this sort of stuff, and they're running like they get like a Are You OK Day person to come down and run all that sort of stuff, and then that's really important in saving lives, I think.
Yeah.
Because without that, a lot of those blokes wouldn't have much purpose in the area.
My daughter Jasmine's involved with a really wonderful project. I can't think of the name of it. But basically, it's just a helpline where people ring if they're lonely.
Mm.
It's not because I'm mentally ill or anxious. I'm just lonely, and they bring people into and they ring up this helpline, and somebody talks to them and just helps them build a relationship. Now, what they've actually started to do too, which is wonderful, is if some of these people who've been calling for help, they actually invite them to come in and form part of the team that takes the calls.
Okay.
And this is a wonderful cause. Perhaps you should put on the end of it, what it actually, the name of it actually is. But the great thing, it gets to the core. It gets to the basic reason, which is so often, a failure of relationship. I love it. I've actually offered to do some fundraisers for it. I said I'll give a talk and we'll put them on free here. They can come and because they do need a certain amount of money. There's a little bit of government funding involved, but I don't think you need very much of that. Mostly what we need is dedicated people.
Mm. Absolutely. But I was going to say with with yourself, what about your own mental health stress? I don't think anyone's ever asked you that before, but you have you might not say it's a stressful job, but from the outside looking in, it could be very stressful in regards to your work. It's always something's wrong or there's a complaint or something. Or what about yourself? What do you do for yourself?
I would be one of the happiest people on earth. Honestly, I've got a fantastically good job, which is really exciting. It's also meaningful too, because it's a mission. I've got thousands of people, and families out there who are affected by what we do. And when I ring somebody on a Sunday night and they talk about how much difference it's made to their lives and how much happy they are and how a man seeing his children grow up, which he never could have in the past, that is rewarding to a really, really extreme degree. Mm. There was one story that this guy told me, which I possibly shared with you in the past, where this was happened 10 years ago, and he was about to leave for work. Now, he worked as a manager for one of the supermarkets, and he worked really long hours, and he never had breakfast with his kids, and he'd come home late at night too. And his little 4-year-old son said to him, "Daddy, I wish you could have breakfast with us." And he said he was driving to work and all the way the tears were streaming down his face, and he quit and he bought a Jim's mowing franchise. Well, it doesn't have to be a Jim's mowing franchise, it could be anything. But the point of it is, from that time onwards, he could have breakfast and dinner with his son every day. And so many times he said to his boy, who's now 14 years old, "Thank you for saying that. That's changed my life so much." That kind of thing is incredibly positive and rewarding, so that when I get up in the morning, it's not just a case of I'm out to make money or whatever. I'm out to do something worthwhile. And also the other thing too with me is that we live in a reasonably modest fashion. We don't spend, my car's worth $10,000. But the funds that are produced by gyms are going into this project of scientific research, which is aiming to look at some of the root causes of addiction and mental health problems and so forth. So my life has extreme purpose. That's a very, very important thing. Now, on top of that, I have a great social environment. I have a wife that I'm crazily in love with after 21 years, and that is wonderful. Not that we don't fight at times. Lee is quite passionate, but I have a great relationship. Most of my children I get on with. I have good relationships at work. A lot of people, my co-workers, I really appreciate. They're wonderful people. So, and I'm healthy. I'm fit. I run at least half an hour a day. I have physical exercise. I maintain my weight, so I'm in very, very good health. So all of these things matter.
Let's talk about that fitness and nutrition, because I think that's an element with mental health that always gets never really mentioned. But it's a holistic approach to it, right? That if you're feeling down, if you go do some movement and have some good food, that at least helps in some way. And if you've still got some issues, well, then you've got to maybe do something else. But maybe you want to talk about your maybe your workout, your nutrition. What do you do for that?
Okay. My aim is at least half an hour of vigorous physical exercise a day. It's probably on average more like an hour. I do something to the point about exercise is it can't be too hard. It shouldn't be painful. They say no pain, no gain. I don't really believe in that kind of stuff. You're pushing yourself a little bit and you're getting puffed, but it shouldn't be terrible. I find that it's important to occupy your mind, so I use something like a talking book or a video, something like a Netflix or something like that. I just watch something, listen to something, so it's easier to keep on going. Actually, it's not difficult to do once you get in the habit of it. It's fun. I love exercise outside. I'll do my exercise, but then in the afternoon when I've got a bit of a break, I'll put on a talking book and go for a half-hour brisk walk, especially on a nice day. Actually, one thing I should say, being outside is really important to mood, particularly in a natural environment. And I'm fortunate to have a farm half an hour from here, so I go up there usually at least once a week and spend a day or two just working physically out of doors.
Because that's an important time for you, because that's where you do a lot of your thinking and you have your audio books and stuff, and that time there, you're not working in the business, you're working outside of it. That's where all your ideas come from generally, isn't it?
Yeah. I always believe too, the important thing isn't between work and non-work. It's between things that are worth doing and things that are not worth doing. So you can have really good work and you can have work which is a waste of time, or it's just there to, it's not productive. But you can also be doing things that aren't work. For example, I drive my son to school and pick him up every day, almost every day when I can. Now, that time that I spend in conversation, like 20 minutes or so each trip, is one of the most useful parts of my day. It's not my job, but it's really, really worth doing. And the time I spend with your family is really important. And Lee and I will spend, if on Saturday morning, we spend time just talking and cuddling and so forth. And that's really useful. It's really worthwhile.
Well, do you think a lack of family, or there is more of a lack of family now than what there was in the past, or especially being promoted towards being a good mental health or having good mental health? Because what I think seems to happen is if you've got mental health issues, people just go, right, go to the psychologist or psychiatrist and here's a bunch of medication, when no one looks at the holistic person's life. What have they got that's for purpose, or what have they got in regards to the nutrition? Or
there are certain kinds of guidelines and rules about family life, like the family dinner, for example. Now, we have a rule in our house, at least I certainly insist on it, is that when you eat together, you eat facing each other. You don't eat side by side. You certainly don't have the television. Phones are banned from the table. Lee sometimes takes hers out and so forth, but I'll confiscate it if need be. Sometimes she can take it. But you sit there, you talk. We always start with prayer, with family prayer, just a brief one, and we communicate as a family. We actually go out quite a lot too, and it's not expensive like the local pizza joint, but one of the great things about that is that you actually spend time together. You're actually driving, and then you're sitting waiting for the food, and then you're eating it, and then you're driving it afterwards, and we might go off to Cold Rock and get some dessert or something like that. So that's that occasion, that sense of occasion.
And that's every week. That's every week you do it.
We would go out more than once a week, actually.
Because I get comments online on Facebook and stuff saying, I've just seen Jim at some Thai joint down here, or whatever. Someone says, were you at a Thai joint in Lilydale or something like that? It's quite funny. Yeah. So people seeing you around and learning so online.
But I would never go out by myself.
Yeah.
I mean, hardly anybody does these days anyway. But no, it's almost always a family occasion. And we do it deliberately. Actually, Lee's a wonderful cook, so it's not necessarily the food is any better. And sometimes it's not nearly as good.
That's for the holistic thing. It's for the drive there. It's for the sitting down together, all that sort of stuff.
So yeah, sense of community is so valuable. And I think the problems with smartphones and the way they take over is really, really dangerous stuff. We have certain kinds of rules about limits on what you can do and when you can use them and so forth.
What do you think will happen with that? Because there's, depression's at its highest it's ever been. You've got a lot of kids. Instagram's been proven to be very harmful for, let's say, the 12 to 16-year-old girl, but there's nothing still happening to it. So where do you think that's all going to go?
I can't see it getting any better. Because they don't think the government can do very much about such things. Even though it's recognised to be a mental health issue, it has to come from the individual. One of the things about my research study, which is based on the research we're doing, it's called biohistory, is that governments and economic forces and political forces and stuff really don't matter that much. What matters is individual character. It's what we do as individuals that makes the world better or worse. So you start from yourself, you start from your own family, you start from your own circle. And that's where we need to focus.
A lot of people don't want to do that, though. They want to try and change the world before they look after themselves. I think Jordan Peterson calls it, you make sure you clean your room before you go out there and try and change anything else in the world. So how are you've touched on it briefly, but your research, how are your research, do you think, directly impact or help with mental health or mental illness issues?
There's a change in character taking place across the world, particularly in wealthy countries, which is to do with lots of affluence and to do with population density, and it tends to have a negative effect on character. It also breaks down families and breaks down social organisations, and it does tend to create this anonymous sort of mass of people. What we're doing is doing experiments with rats, actually subjecting them to mild food restriction. That's like about 25% less food than they would normally eat, which is that's not severe. They don't lose drastic weight or anything like that. It's more like being starved. And then we look at the changes that take place in their physiology, in things like their cytokines, their microbes, their proteins, their changes to the epigenetic settings, changes to pheromones, looking at all kinds of things. Now, the aim of that is to actually work out a way to reproduce that. Now, if we can produce a substance, a treatment, which I think we can, to actually reverse that, it'll actually have the effect of reversing many of these changes. Wow. So, for example, it'll make people more long-term thinking. So somebody who the issue with most attitudes to the reason people don't control their diet or exercise is because they're very focused on the short term. If I have a chocolate or a bun now or chips now or soft drink, I'll feel good. I might feel worse in the future. Don't worry about that so much. And the same thing with drugs, even worse, or alcohol or gambling or all these kinds of problems. They come as a result of people thinking too short term. What do I want to do immediately right now? What this treatment would do is make people more long term thinking. They're thinking, well, I'm not going to have this now because I know that if I do, I'll put on weight and I'll feel less healthy. Or I might feel like sitting on the couch, but I know if I go for a run, I'm going to feel great afterwards. So it's looking at the physiological basis. I do think that has very major potential for reversing some of these changes, which is why, even though we support things like Beyond Blue as an organisation, my personal investment is entirely in basic research.
I was going to say, with what form would the treatment come in? I remember you talking about pheromones before. Was this something with a pill or? It could be
a pill. It could be pheromones. It could be something like that.
How far are you off getting to that stage?
We don't know, actually. We know that there's something in the urine of rats that are calorie restricted, which does actually tend to have the same effect. And we're just going through the different compounds. We then have about 13 compounds that are more prevalent in these restricted rats. So we're actually testing them one by one. So we could have the beginnings of a treatment of some kind within a year.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the hope, is to go to, let's say, human trials or some clinical trials and then go from there? Yep.
Well, basically the way it would be used is that if you found something that was thoroughly tested on rats, because rats and humans are very similar when it comes to these things like the limbic system and so forth. If we can experiment on rats, and then what we'll do it as a trial with people, probably in terms of something like treatment of drug addiction or something like that. That'd be the most obvious place to start. And what you should find is that there's a significantly more likely to stay off the drugs. Because the problem with drug addiction, again, it's not. People think it's to do with you're physically addicted and you're afraid of withdrawal symptoms. But people who are heroin addicts get off. They go cold turkey all the time, but then they like it and they go back. And again, it's because they're thinking short term. What do I want immediately, right now? And if we can change that mentality, then it will solve this problem.
It's an interesting way you put it, Jim, because there's a lot of self-help books will say exactly the same thing you're doing, but then there's some people who can do that and then make permanent change, whereas there's a lot of people who can't do it. So what you're saying is, here's an intervention where it can actually, if you want to do it, take this or do whatever it is, and then you'll become more hardworking. Because I know at one stage you want to trial it on yourself, didn't you? I think to be the first person to do the human trial with this. That's how confident you are in this thing working.
They wouldn't let me.
I was going to say, imagine you more hardworking than what you are. But I was going to say...
I'd take it. I'd take it if it was available, for sure.
Really? Okay.
Because I would become more
even more
hardworking, more disciplined, just able to do things that I want to do, that I really want to do. But in the short term, I'm not as hardworking as you make it, John.
Oh no, I think you're too easy on yourself. But what you do, which a lot of people don't realise, is you might call it character, but as I said, you've got this unrelenting discipline where you probably don't want to do that exercise in the morning, but you just get up because you know the long-term benefit is worth that is worth that little inconvenience at the time, and that's a pretty good quality to have.
There's also a sense. There's a wonderful book called Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm reading another one actually, which is also wonderful, called The Power of Habit. But this one, in Atomic Habits, one of the things it points out that you've got to set up a routine, a habit. But also, if you do it properly, it becomes part of your self-image. So, for example, if I didn't have a run, I would feel bad about myself. I'd feel I let myself down. My image of myself involves somebody who's exercising. So it's not actually difficult to keep to it once you're accustomed. There's certain aspects I like of it. It's a bit of a break, and it's kind of, you feel good when you've finished, and yeah. Developing good habits is the key. Atomic Habits is a great book, actually. Anybody haven't read it, it's just talking about how you can make it easy for yourself. I mean, things like food, for example. All right, I like chocolate. There's no question about it. I really do like chocolate, and I like having soft drinks occasionally and chips. And I'm not immune to those sort of things. But one of the best things is you're not going to eat it if it's not there. So we try not to have that kind of stuff in the house. Now, if I really want to go out and get chocolate, I can drive to the supermarket and get it. But that's quite a way away. And also, I don't eat. I have 16-8 fasting. I don't eat during the morning. I'm not tempted to eat during the morning, no matter what's available, because that would be betraying my own sense of myself and who I am. So once you get it as part of your image, it's a lot easier to keep there.
So psychologically, you tell yourself almost, I'm a fit person or I'm a runner, and you identify as a runner, and if you don't do that, then it affects your self-image, or you might not feel as good.
It's very important to set precise goals too. You don't just say, I'm going to run more. I'm going to run at least half an hour a day. At least half an hour a week. No more is great, but half an hour is the minimum. And as I said, with food, it's very easy. 16-8 fasting is easy because it's a very sharp line. You eat, you don't. And I won't eat anything in the morning, not even an apple. Nothing. I drink soy milk and hot water. I call it wham.
Wham, yeah, that's the one.
Right. Yeah. So that's allowed. I can drink water, but I wouldn't drink a soft drink or a fruit juice or anything like that.
But the fasting is a newish thing you've been doing. It hasn't been something you've been doing for a long time.
Yeah, it's been going for a year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah, and how did you implement that though? So did you say to yourself, how did you identify if that one happened?
Well, I just read about it, and it's got benefits. Actually, one of the benefits is that it does tend to reduce your calorie intake, but the other benefit is that there's a thing called autophagy. I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it, by which if you don't feed your cells all the time, they actually they can scare out the bad stuff in the cell. They basically use it up and get rid of it. It cleans out your cells. And I find that not difficult at all. Sometimes I get a little bit hungry in the morning, but then I just think, well, it's okay. I just start focusing on my work or whatever it is, and I can make it to. Usually, I don't eat between about 8 in the evening and 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I don't find it difficult these days. And it actually is nice in a way because I can be a little bit more lenient on myself when I want something. Like just occasionally, like last week, I went out and had a souvlaki vegetarian souvlaki, which I really love, with some chips and a Coke.
Nothing wrong with that. Everyone
and a half choke Coke share with my wife, but that's a kind of an indulgence. But I enjoy it. So you can do the things that you enjoy in moderation. I think people try and go too extreme. It's a really big problem that they try and cut down on the joy of life. And I enjoy my life very much.
Well, we just had the Shane Warne with the juice cleanse, I think he was doing or something, 14-day juice cleanse.
Fluids only for 2 weeks. Yeah. No, look, I'm not saying that's what did it, but it's not a good practice. It really isn't. It's just such a tragedy. He's a good man, and Australia will miss him. And if he could have had more regular discipline instead of going on these benders and then going off it, I think, he would have been better off.
And what about your religion in regards to what you think about, let's say, mental health or well-being or your community? How important do you think your religion is to that, or for people to find that maybe in their life?
Well, it works for me. I mean, I believe in God, so it's hard to have religion if you haven't got any sense of a divine being. And I have experiences that suggest to me that that's really not just something made up in my head. But look, on a purely secular level, obviously, being a committed believer of any religion is very important. It gives you a sense of community. Anytime I meet a Christian, for example, a real Christian, you know, like at training and stuff, you instantly, you're your brother or your sister. You talk the same language. You understand, you know, what church do you go to, what's that like. Suddenly, you've got a connection. So even though committed Christians are a minority these days, it's very warming. And when you are with other Christians, you also have a certain sense of how people are going to behave. We don't tend to be, the people that I deal with anyway, don't tend to condemn other people so much. A lot more positive. And then you've got the gratitude thing too. We're taught to thank God in all circumstances. So, for example, one of the reasons that things don't get me down is because I'm always going to look at the positive side, the good things about it. Okay, you know, I'm not getting quite so with one of my children, but you know, she's a wonderful girl, and she's, you know, she's really disciplined. You've got good moral character and so forth. And so you always look at the positive side of anything, and then you know, with time you do get on with it. So you mend on that one. So always looking at the positive side. And I wake up every morning. I've got my beautiful wife next to me. That makes me so happy. I love her so much. And so sometimes she annoys me, and I annoy her, and we'll have arguments. But I'm overwhelmingly grateful for having her. You know, meeting Lee 21 years ago was, you know, it's the best single thing that ever happened to me. And always the attitude of gratitude, that's very much part of the way Christians think. We're always praising, thanking God for all these blessings. Beautiful day. Thank you, God, for that.
I was going to say as well, if someone was a bit aimless, let's say they had a franchisee or whoever it was come to you and maybe their relationships break down or they just got no sense of any purpose at all in their life, what advice would you give that person?
What matters to you? Find something that matters to you and pursue that. Obviously, you know, faith is great, but it's not possible for everybody.
Definitely not me, no.
No.
But you substitute with other things, or you try to, I guess.
Well, yeah, but in a sense, the benefit of religion is not actually. I mean, we do believe God is there, but the benefit is actually in what God gets us to do. So it's not so much that being a Christian by itself and believing in God, that has no effect at all. I mean, even demons believe in God, but it's acting and it's following the influence, being part of a community, caring about other people, looking out for them, helping them, which is really part of, like in church on Sunday we had this sermon about helping other people and different ways to do it. So there's a community mentoring thing that I'm actually going to try and sign up for, where you can actually spend an hour a week mentoring somebody. I just have to ask if I can do it remotely because it's very hard for me to get there. And then there's the food pantry, and we're looking at ways. So that was part of what we did on Sunday in church. Now that kind of activity is actually, it's good for other people, but it's actually very good for us too. And studies have shown that the best thing you can ever do with money is to give it away to a cause that you're involved with, or give your time. That is actually a great creative happiness. So I would say to anybody, if you're feeling aimless, find something that matters to you and start working on that. Volunteer for something. You know, be involved, reach out to other people in some way. Like this wonderful young man that I was talking to who's I was ringing him up on a 10-year anniversary call. And he's only working 3 days a week on his business. And he said, it's wonderful because I can make enough money in 3 days a week. And you know what he does in the other days? He goes out and meets the homeless.
This is the guy in South Australia, yeah.
What I told you about.
Yeah.
And that to me is amazing. And that is...
He's making good money too.
He is making good money.
Yeah, exactly right.
I feel very proud about that. But isn't that wonderful? You see, it's a funny thing in a way. You talk about people buying a franchise, and to someone like me who's very ambitious, the obvious potential for that is you can become extremely wealthy, and you can. You can start off mowing lawns or being a handyman or pest control or dog wash, and you can build the business and do better and better, and you can make millions of dollars. But you know what's interesting is that the great majority of franchisees don't want that. what they want and what they say again. I want time with my family. I want relationships. I want community. I want a life that's worth living. I want to work so I can have a great life and a great work-life balance. That is overwhelmingly what they're after, and that's really great. It's you know, it's not easy for me to probably understand it because I'm not that kind of person. But even for myself, I had this ambition, but I would never. There's a saying that says that no other success can compensate for failure in the home. And if your family is a mess, if your relationships are a mess, what is the point of money?
Well, the reason why I asked you these questions because, as I said, we've got booked on a lot of podcasts. There's heaps of things, and we're all about business. Whereas I don't think a lot of people know this stuff that you're saying overwhelmingly about you. And a lot of people just these days, they want a tall poppy syndrome. Oh, there's a rich millionaire, cut him down. Whereas if people now know or can hear that there's all these things you're doing, it must make you feel good to know, as you said, even though you've got 4,600 franchisees or plus currently in the books, over 30 years you've probably had, I don't know, maybe 100, how many people? 50,000, maybe 60,000 families where
that we've affected in some way.
That you've affected in some way and had a positive outcome on. So it must make you feel pretty good to.
Yeah. Mind you, I don't really mind the tall poppy syndrome. I think it's a sign that Australians are more egalitarian. And I think somebody who drives around in a swish car and says how rich and how important they are, they're a bit of a turd, honestly. And Australians recognise that. I don't think Australians mind people being successful, but they do mind people that are up themselves, who think because they've got more money they're better than somebody else, which is not the case at all.
Well, the one thing we hear about you, especially with training, is that you're approachable.
Yeah.
Or they say down to earth are the two sort of phrases where they watch things online. It's the same thing. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not saying I'm the best either. I get very annoyed at people at times. Franchisees who keep on getting complaints and stuff and want me to take them off, and I say, but you've got to do what you're supposed to do, and then you wouldn't get these complaints. And they say, oh, Jim, you're affecting my mental health, and if you really cared about me, you'd knock off these complaints. And anyway,
yeah.
So I'm not always tactful. It's always an effort. I'm very impatient. I get annoyed easily. So we work at. It's a work in progress, isn't it? It
is, but you're very honest upfront about it all. So it's not a bad thing to be about it. So what's your plan though for yourself in the next couple of years? You've obviously got your research you're going to keep pumping out. You got franchisee goals. What do you sort of want to do for yourself, or maybe in regards to your family or your community? Or your church?
Well, we've changed churches just recently, and I'd like to get more involved with that with our new church. We haven't actually joined a life group yet. I used to run one for a few years in my old church, and now I've got to get involved in that one. So that's important. I don't think anything particularly different. I mean,
what prompted the change of church? Is it just something new, or?
There's a few things. My previous church is very fundamentalist. They believe the world was created 6,500 years ago, which I find.
Which, being a man of science as you are, yeah,
it's a little bit difficult, and so we just in a church which doesn't put quite so much emphasis. I mean, I believe the Bible's the word of God, but I don't think you have to be quite so literal about 6,500 years, because evolution is a pretty good theory. So it was stuff like that. Look, great church, great people, great pastors, and I love them all, but it's sometimes you just feel more comfortable in a slightly different environment. And that's the great thing about churches, is that you can go where you fit in, and also where you can, which most inspires you. I like to go to church on a Sunday and come out feeling challenged by something. I like to feel it's helped me to become a better person. Now, whether it's to be more involved with giving or service, or whether it's to become more self-disciplined, or controlling my temper better, or whatever it is.
Yep.
I like that challenge. One of my favourite Christian singers is Keith Green, who actually was very popular when I first became a Christian back in the around about 1980, and he's very challenging. It's always the push to do better, to be better, to live your life in a better way, to live the life that God wants you to, which is the same thing in my view.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Jim. We'll leave it there. Hopefully this gives an insight to everyone else. If you want to follow Jim, check out @TheJimPenman. There's lots of different stuff as well. And thanks for listening and watching, and make sure you subscribe. But thank you very much, Jim, for giving up your time to talk about some other things that hopefully people can get a little bit better outside of the generic business interviews that are online.
Okay.
Thank you.